Well, we've all been lied to. I've been lied to. You've been lied to. And it's kind of like what Mark Twain said, Samuel Clemens, right? Lies, damn lies, and statistics is we've all been lied to about the effectiveness of public education in the United States of America. And we've been lied to for decades. I know it. You're shocked. You're shocked. But if you actually hang around for just a few more minutes and pay attention to the stats and the math, what you're going to know is we've had the wool pulled over our eyes. And it's all from the Department of Education, but it jumped up on my radar from this AEI article, and we're going to link to that obviously here so you can pull it up. And it's talking about in this article that in the last 50 years, from 1970 to 2017, that the amount of school staff and administrators, I'm going to flip down here to a little awesome chart for you, is this chart comes up, right? And what it says is, if you see it, since 1970 to now, the number of teachers and staff has grown in public schools by 57%. Seems like a lot, right? It seems like, wow, that's a lot more teachers and it's a lot more staff, so there must logically be a lot more students to educate. But the study, and this is from the Department of Education, okay, so it's just people summarizing this study that the Department of Education put out. That little organization up in D.C. that was created in 1979, right? That it was Jimmy Carter's administration that just now has created some good stuff and a lot of bureaucracy, right? Just don't forget about the bureaucracy word. So since the 1970s, both of these lines have gone up. And then they looked at the amount of population the students have gone up. Has it also gone up by 57% in the last 50 years? Well, nope. It's gone up 10%. So the premise, the kind of, it feels logical, doesn't it? That, well, if the staff went up by, and the teachers went up by 57%, and the students only went up by 10%, then the amount of education and the amount of intellect that these students are leaving schools with should have just gone through the roof. Everyone should be smart. Everyone should be capable. Everyone should be solving problems, holistic learning. But then they look at the standardized tests and graduation rates and all that data points, and they say, wait a minute. We've added 57% more teachers and staff. You've only added 10% more students, and education has not gotten any better. So shame on you. Shame on you, public schools. And that's the lie. Because there's a lie in this number that no one wants to address. Well, I'm going to address it. Some of you already know about this, and it actually got brought up to me by a few superintendents, so thank you for that. I'll send you a little thank you note, is that at the same time, since the 1970s, several other things happened in America, right? And it was the amount of laws that got passed, some of them really, really awesome laws to help protect children, create some standardized systems across the nation, but at the same time, those laws created a ton of paperwork, right? So, I don't want to, look, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, 1975. That's a really important act. No Child Left Behind. Pretty important act, right? We don't want to leave anybody behind. The Head Start Act of 1965, right? There's just law after law after law. And then you have state laws and county requirements or local municipality requirements and grant proposals to get money. So what it's done in the last 50 years is the amount of paperwork and administrative burden that's been placed on schools, according to my estimation, and I feel like it's a pretty good estimation, it's about 20 times more paperwork and bureaucracy than were around the 50s and 60s. Well, so all that extra teachers and staff that have been hired are there to do paperwork. They weren't designed to educate children. They weren't told to educate children. They were taught to do paperwork. That's what the government asked them to do. We have to hire people to fill out paperwork instead of training the babies. And I'm not saying that paperwork is not necessary in a big, gigantic machine. I mean, I was in the Army. And talking about paperwork, I mean, you're filling out forms and reports, and you have to do that so everyone up and down understands what the parameters are in life. And so paperwork in and of itself is, it's bureaucracy. It's a burden. You're not really getting a lot of value for it, but it does keep people accountable. I'm down with keeping people accountable moving forward. But what I'm not going to do is blame public schools for what we as a society have placed on them, this increased burden. We place the burden on them. And that's the lie no one's talking about. We want them to do more with less. Well, We need to continue to give the public schools more money to educate the babies. And if we're going to layer on more bureaucracy, more paperwork, we've got to give them money to be able to do that too, instead of taking money from educating the kids to fill out paperwork, because nobody wants to actually admit that that's what we're doing as a society. It seems just bizarre to me. So when you're looking around at public education and you're saying, you hear some story, some article comes out and somebody goes, well, they're wasting our money. Well, I mean, every government entity probably, yeah, there's waste. There's waste in my own company. There's waste in my own house. So there's always waste. But if you say, but don't get suckered into this. When they say, well, they're paid so much more than they used to be, we just throwing me at the problem and education's gotten better. I want you to have the power to go, oh, hold on, time out. We've asked them to do a lot more paperwork. Maybe we ought to be giving them more money to educate the kids instead of just fill out paperwork. And I've got, well, Caroline's over here. So Caroline, I got one more story. Just one, she's telling me to zip it already, but I'm going to keep talking. I got one story because we're out of Memphis, Tennessee. We had Memphis city schools. This was a long time ago. We have Shelby County schools. Since then, the school districts have changed up a lot. But I was talking to a mom out in the county that said, Brian, that's really not her voice, but I think it's funny to Brian, the county schools, which are, by the way, mainly affluent, suburbs, more money. We only pay $12,000 per student, and our kids are doing better on test. And the city, more poverty, more impoverished population, less money. That's according to the statistics, the numbers, right? Well, they're getting $17,000 per student, and their test scores are not as good. So they're saying that their school district is better than the other one because they're doing more with less money. That's a lie too. I mean, the math is there. The math is there that they are, statistically speaking, getting less money per child, right? $11,000, $12,000 compared to the $17,000, and that they're getting better results. That's true too. But we're missing a fundamental issue. Those parents in the suburbs have more money to continue to educate their children outside of school. They take them to the zoo. They take them to museums. They read books with them. Maybe their parents aren't having to work 2 jobs to pay the bills, so they're spending more time on their child's education besides just what's in school. But if you grew up like I did, little apartment, subsidized housing, yep, my mom put herself through nursing school. My mom had to work nights and weekends, and we never always knew what house we were staying at that night. One of my great aunts, we had great families. Thank God we had support. But I would come home and not know which house I was going to stay at. My mom was trying to feed us. Look, I love my mom. Don't get me wrong, but she was busy. She was busy trying to make sure that we had a house and a roof over our head. She didn't have a lot of time for extracurricular activities to educate us. She couldn't buy, this is before computers, but she couldn't, she would have bought us a computer. All right, we don't have all this extra things. I didn't have the ability to go to tutoring class. I got whatever education the public school could provide to me, just like more urban areas with more poverty. So many of those parents, the only education that child gets is through the public school. They're doing the best they can, but they don't have all those extra means. And when I told this to this lovely woman, she went, oh my gosh, you're right. I go, right. It's not that no one's trying to blame other people. They're just using data, statistics in a way that can be misconstrued, can be misinterpreted. It is true. 57% more teachers and staff, only 10% more students. But that's not the whole story, man. You can't just look at the science and the data. You have to look at the art too, like what's going on in human emotions. And yeah, I'm a psychologist, so I'm always looking at the psychological side. But we can't just skip that and act like those kids in the most need don't deserve a little bit more help from society to end up in the same spot. Something to think about.